right? You want to stay camouflaged against the herd like a zebra. You don't want to stand out. So you go up to the zebra in your Jeep and you've got a stick with a rag on it, and you put a nice daub of red paint on the zebra's haunch, and the first thing that you know, you get it the hell out of there and the lions kill it. Because they can identify the thing that stands out. And so that's why there aren't creative people.
Hello everyone, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Cheape.
And welcome back to our reading
It
of...
took me 3 hours to read this.
Welcome back to our reading of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. Today
It's not an antidote, it causes it.
we're getting over the hump, so to speak. We are in the 7th rule.
Boy, was it a hump.
And this is, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. He doesn't
That was expedient. This was not that word.
Here's the thing. Jordan Peterson spends this entire chapter reciting Bible stories and then talking about why those Bible stories are all about how you should withhold from pleasure now.
It's a sermon.
In order to get something better later on.
That doesn't sound Christian at all to me.
Once you read it, it is. So, without further ado, we normally section these off into sections, but this chapter's kind of a mess, so this whole episode is just... So the chapter begins, cheerily enough, with this little tidbit. Life is suffering, that's clear. There is no more basic, irrefutable truth. It's basically what God tells Adam and Eve immediately before he kicks them out of paradise.
So I did this on stream where I read it out loud. I'm going to count that's clear as a sentence.
Yeah.
It's not. So 3 sentences, and then we're talking about Jesus and God and the Bible for the rest of this.
I also want to point out, he says life is suffering. No, life includes suffering, but unless you're a person who maybe mainstays Hot Topic, maybe you're like one of their highest clients, life is not suffering.
Life definitely includes suffering. And he makes a case for it, basically saying that, like, you have to work to fucking survive, but is that suffering?
Not particularly, dependent
We all joke about it, but that's not really suffering.
Sure.
Kind of minimizes actual suffering, in my opinion.
So he talks a little bit about Adam and Eve and how life is suffering, and then he says to that, what in the world should be done about it? The simplest, most obvious, and most direct answer? Pursue pleasure. Follow your impulses. Live for the moment. Do what's expedient. Lie, cheat, steal, deceive, manipulate, but don't get caught. In an ultimately meaningless universe, what possible difference could it make? So he is essentially extolling the idea of some sort of hedonistic nihilism as the default position for one who feels life is suffering.
It's also beyond hedonistic nihilism, because it implies that lying, cheating, stealing, deceiving, manipulating are all things we gain pleasure from. I'm sure in a limited capacity, once in a while, those things could definitely include a pleasurable feeling to the person committing them.
Sure.
I can't imagine none of those have ever run into that. But as a rule, I don't think that lying, cheating, stealing, deceiving, and manipulating will always net you hedonistic pleasure.
No.
So that's not a way to live your life, even if you were just basically hedonistic and nihilistic. What this is a misrepresentation, a straw man, if you will, of hedonistic nihilism altogether, which I don't partake in, but... like, I'm kind of irked on behalf of those that do, because it's so inaccurate.
Also, what difference could it make? Jail, if you're committing crimes.
Jail. Like typically, and this goes back to the Dillahunty debate, where they basically discuss secular morality, and you don't do those things from a secular perspective, which is usually where hedonistic nihilism lives.
Sure.
Right. I wouldn't say most of those people are religious, but I'm sure it happens. They can reconcile that however they deem. But you don't do things to people you don't like because you don't want that treatment in response. And also, it doesn't always make people feel good to be assholes to everybody. Yeah. It could be a hedonistic act for me to give someone food they don't have.
Sure.
Right? I know that maybe that doesn't sound like strict hedonism, but it's certainly...
going around and saying, hey, everyone drinks on me. That's kind of hedonistic.
That's absolutely.
But it's beneficial to a lot of people.
Sure. If getting them drunk as benefits.
I'm assuming...
I know what you're saying.
I'm assuming
he
they're
means
not...
water in a desert. Drinks
Sure.
on me.
The pleasure of expediency may be fleeting, but it's pleasure nonetheless, and that's something to stack up against the terror and pain of existence. Every man for himself, and the devil take the hindmost, as the old proverb has it. Why not simply take everything you can get, whenever the opportunity arises? Why not determine to live in that manner? Empathy, laws, the social contract, many of the reasons we just listed. Again, It concerns me personally about Jordan Peterson's personality that he genuinely, even as a professor of psychology and philosophy, he cannot foresee mental mechanisms by which we don't want to hurt others.
Right, yeah.
It speaks to me to a certain sense of, like, does he just feel like the only thing keeping him from doing these things is some higher power? Is that what
Well,
he's
I mean,
thinking?
that's what I gather from the rest of this chapter.
Yeah.
Which is like 7 chapters in one.
Yeah.
But on top of that, it's I don't know. It's sort of sad that, like, apart from hedonistic pleasure, Jordan finds life wholly suffering.
Yep.
There's not a lot of people that actually, like, take that. Some people might say there's a lot of there's too much to weigh it.
Yeah.
But all of it
seems
not only not realistic, but just like, you maybe shouldn't be in the field and maybe just be a customer.
It's odd how nihilistic his view of the world tends to be.
He's a postmodern Marxist nihilist if I've ever seen one.
Despite him rallying against nihilism and not understanding the actual meaning.
Yeah.
Anyway, continuing. Our ancestors worked out very sophisticated answers to such questions, but we still don't understand them very well. This is because they are in large part still implicit, manifest primarily in ritual and myth, and as of yet incompletely articulated. We act them out and represent them in stories, but we're not yet wise enough to formulate them explicitly. This is him just pulling shit out of his ass and saying, you know, the myths of the past, specifically the Western Christian ones, they have wisdom that we have yet to even understand. Again, putting this odd, if he's not religious, he certainly talks like a very religious person, where he's putting this higher sense of wisdom, this high idea of some sort of ancient knowledge of the past that has been lost into these stories. And certainly you can take moral lessons from stories. We do that all the time.
Absolutely.
Aesop's Fables, for instance, perfect example. But that doesn't mean those stories have some intrinsic greater truth than we could ever understand today.
No, I don't understand why it being an old thought means it's, like, insurmountable.
Right.
Just because it's old, typically an old thought usually is incorrect.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some things like gravity that are fine, like they hold true. Later on, he's going to go on a diatribe against facts. I'm not making that up. And I kept remembering this kind of shit.
Yep.
During that, where he's... I don't know how people like... I don't know if Ben Shapiro likes Jordan Peterson, but people that are fans of Ben Shapiro and are fans of Jordan Peterson are... It's a pretty round Venn diagram.
Sure.
I don't know how they reconcile when the facts over feels thing.
Don't know.
Yeah.
But it's their feels. So
that's pretty much where it comes to a head. Yeah.
The biblical narrative of paradise and the fall is one such story, fabricated by our collective imagination. Working over the centuries, it provides a profound account of the nature of being, and points the way to a mode of conceptualization and action well matched to that nature. In the Garden of Eden, prior to the dawn of self-consciousness, so goes the story, human beings were sinless. Our primordial parents, Adam and Eve, walked with God then. Tempted by the snake, the first couple ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, discovered death and vulnerability, and turned away from God. Mankind was exiled from paradise and began its effortful mortal existence. The idea of sacrifice enters soon afterward, beginning with the accounts of Cain and Abel and developing through the Abrahamic adventures of the Exodus. Abrahamic adventures is my favorite way one could describe wandering in the desert for 40 years.
Adventures?
Yeah, adventures.
That's nice. It's nice of them.
Nice spin. After much contemplation, struggling, humanity learns that God's favor could be gained and his wrath averted through proper sacrifice, and also that bloody murder might be motivated among those unwilling or unable to succeed in this manner. What he's saying there is, they learned how to be good people and stuff through sacrifice, and through sacrifice to God, they learn to sacrifice things for others, and they discovered that those who don't do that are bad people who maybe should be murdered or might murder you. I'd like to point out, though, within the Old Testament...
This irritates me so much.
The conquests of the Jews are well documented in the Bible. It's not like they were a group that was, like, just going around pacifists and going like,
right.
Hey guys, how you doing? No, God explicitly
they murder
went
people
out...
because they're in the territory that God promised them.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah.
On top of that, it's anthropologically inaccurate on every stretch of the imagination. Sacrifice the two gods is based on weather. Like, literally the rains and shit. It's based on appeasement, and they found a correlation between sacrifice, specifically animals, and good weather or not ill befalling them, let's say. And I got to imagine a lot of it has to do with they end up in the Fertile Crescent.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't know where the Fertile Crescent is, you haven't watched the show long, and you don't know a lot about geography, but there's the Tigris-Euphrates River in Iraq, which is where all of this kind of started. Mesopotamia. There's not a huge part of that world that is super habitable in an ancient way. Like, nowadays we can kind of get around that with, aqueducts and terraforming and other modes, just trade in general. But back then, there's literally a tribe. And it turns out that, things can get pretty volatile. And so, going all the way back into that culture, you have the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Great Floods, and they talk about that. And they had sacrifice all the way through that, and it was animal sacrifice. I hypothesize, I don't know if this is true, and no one really knows that this is true, but this is I'd say it's a common thought among the anthropological and historical thinkers. I could be wrong, but I'm just going to assume that for two reasons. First, vegetables, because of the agricultural revolution, they're seasonal, so you can't sacrifice them all year long. Though they tried in ziggurats to put any excess in there. But if you go down to sacrifice itself, and kind of the lesson we learned in Cain and Abel. Although he misrepresents Cain and Abel's story to a ridiculous degree.
To the point where I would call it outright lying. He's
right.
not just stretching the truth, he is lying.
Like he says that like Abel is Cain's like ideal person. That's never discussed. It's literally just the difference is it comes down to Abel has meat sacrifice, Cain does a vegetable sacrifice.
God wants meat.
And God wants meat.
That's
and I
the
think
story.
Because meat is both symbologically speaking, it's kind of what lifted us out of being not human necessarily. Like being able to have the nutrients from the marrow, specifically in the fats and stuff, helped human beings become what we are. Sure. I mean, there's lots of reasons there, but also animals are available year round.
Yeah.
And it smells good when you cook them. So I imagine they have a lot of these cultural connotations. So that's why the sacrifice is there. I know that was long-winded, but it has to be said. Otherwise, because he's just totally dismissing the actual cultural realities and anthropological realities of why this mode exists and why it gets expanded on in the Jesus myth as well.
Yeah. There is little difference between sacrifice and work. They are both uniquely human. Sometimes animals act as if they are working, but they are really only following the dictates of their nature. Beavers build dams. They do so because they are beavers, and beavers build dams.
That is, wow, science.
What a hot take, Jordan. Okay. Jordan here is trying to draw, for some reason, an arbitrary line between what humans consider work and what animals do.
He'll often say as well, like humans don't have long-term thinking. They're always like, now, so a wolf will eat 20 pounds of meat, right?
Sure, and this is true to a certain extent. They've done experiments, I know, for instance, in psychology, with apes. If you give them a pile of, like, if you give them a certain amount of bananas, they'll eat the bananas. But, like, they don't have the capability of saying, I have surplus bananas, I should put these somewhere for later.
Sure.
So humans uniquely, in many aspects, I'd imagine...
We have forethought, I think, is the unique part of it.
Some things, like elephants and dolphins, might have the beginnings of some of that stuff.
Dogs are similar,
but
to a lesser degree.
Yeah, that's more, I think, Pavlovian.
I think so, probably, as well, but...
But anyway, the point is, he draws a distinction between humans and animals, and he considers work to be specifically tied to the idea of sacrifice, and that's why humans have foresight.
So weird.
It's insanity to say humans introduced the idea of sacrifice, ergo we learn foresight.
No, what this is we have a concept of time.
Yeah.
And we know that tomorrow is a thing. I don't know that a dog knows tomorrow is a thing.
Oh, don't worry. He says right here, the discovery that gratification could be delayed was simultaneously the discovery of time, and with it, causality.
But that's not only it.
No.
Like, he also dismisses, and I know this is kind of nitpicking, but there's plenty of animals that exhibit forethought in a way that is purely instinctual. But bears, for example, squirrels are a really good example. Wolves, he cites wolves in here, and I don't know why he didn't just do a quick Google. Wolves often eat more than they can and regurgitate much of it to their young.
Sure.
So that they don't have to go hunting as well. But this is exhausting.
Our ancestors acted out a drama, a fiction. They personified the force that governs fate as a spirit that can be bargained with, traded with, as if it were another human being. And the amazing thing is that it worked!
It didn't work! This is... In so many words right now, he's saying basically prayer worked.
He's saying that burning sacrifices was effective.
Yeah, it wasn't effective.
No.
It was correlative. I brought this up again when I read this on stream, but I think it bears repeating. Of course, ritual animal sacrifice feels like it works, because if it fails, over half the time you die. Right? I mean, if you just every day you burn an animal to the Lord, you have a good chance of surviving in a society in which not many societies exist as is.
Sure.
In the only fertile place within 2,000 miles, really.
Yeah.
You're gonna do okay regardless. If you're settling there, odds are you're going to survive there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now on to Cain and Abel, which he brings up like 3 or 4 times and mischaracterizes.
Separately.
Yeah. It's very odd. The biblical story of Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve's sons, immediately follows the story of the expulsion from paradise as mentioned previously. Cain and Abel are really the first humans, since their parents were made directly by God and not born in the standard manner. That's an odd distinction to draw. Clearly, Adam and Eve, if you believe the literal interpretation of Genesis, they're still humans just because they're made by God. Doesn't make a difference really there.
What I think he's doing is a metaphorical human, because they have the full human experience. But wouldn't they have become human directly after eating from the knowledge of good and evil? Yeah, like, I don't know. That just that seems arbitrary and weird to me.
Yep. Cain and Abel live in history, not Eden. I take much
I've umbrage. Yeah.
Yeah. They must work, they must make sacrifices to please God, and they do so, with an altar and proper ritual. But things get complicated. Abel's offering pleases God, but Cain's do not. Abel is rewarded many times over, but Cain is not. It is not precisely clear why, although the text strongly hints that Cain's heart was just not in it.
No! It doesn't!
Did you read the book, Jordan? The reason is because God accepts meat sacrifices, not plants, and it expressly says so. Are you banking on the fact that you hope that the person who is reading this book has not read Genesis?
Oh.
Because that's a lie. You just lied about the contents of Genesis.
I don't know. Where is your brother? Now Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord, and Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was angry and his face was downcast. Then he gets asked, "Why are you angry?" And he's like, let's go to the field, Abel. And then he kills his brother.
That's the story! What are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's made clear later in the Bible that meat sacrifices are what God wants. The moral of that story is, at least in the earlier part, God wants sacrifices of animals, not plants. Okay?
Yeah.
And you even later in this chapter tip your hand to that, but in this section, it doesn't serve your argument, so you ignore that and pretend that the reasoning is somehow elusive.
And not that it grandly matters, because it didn't happen in real life, but the problem is that he's going to frame all of his arguments in this section.
Look, listen.
Literally all of them with Cain and Abel.
After we just read the Cain and Abel story
Sure.
there, he says, although the text strongly hints that Cain's heart was just not in it, strongly hints.
It doesn't.
There is not a single line in what we just read that hints anything of the sort. Jordan Peterson is making shit up and putting it in his book in the hopes that people won't check it.
He's trash.
Moron!
Trash.
Anyway, maybe the quality of what Cain put forward was low. Maybe his spirit...
Not maybe, it says that.
Or maybe God was vexed for some secret reasons of his own.
It's not secret.
He wants meat.
He literally says, if you do good, good things will happen. If you do bad, bad things happen.
All of this is realistic, including the text's vagueness of explanation.
It's not vague!
Not all sacrifices are of equality. Furthermore, it often appears that sacrifices of apparently high quality are not reward for a better future, and it's not clear why.
Yes, that's exactly... The fat of the firstborn. The firstborn is held to high esteem in both animal and humankind in the Jewish tradition that is known as the Old Testament. The firstborns are like the most important thing. So giving God the fat from the firstborn of your flock is the literal most important thing you could possibly give him. Are you dumb?
Why isn't God happy?
Why isn't Jake happy? It's Jordan Peterson's fault.
What would have to change to make him happy? Those are difficult questions, and everyone asks them all the time.
No, I've never asked myself that.
No.
I've never been like, how can I make God happy today? 'Cause he not real. Wait. Someone Photoshop a fedora.
Good job.
Thank you.
To share does not mean to give away something you value and get nothing back. That is instead only what every child who refuses to share fears it means. To share means, properly, to initiate the process of trade. A child who can't share, who can't trade, can't have any friends, because having friends is a form of trade.
I'd say in a conceptual bubble, okay.
Jordan Peterson either has very few friends,
right,
or the friends he has are on a very quid pro quo basis.
We've talked about how he values friends in the past in this very book, which is very lowly.
Yeah.
So, I'd say, socially speaking, there is a give and take to every relationship almost. But, not in that way.
Not to say that it is a trade. Not to bring, clinical weird... People enjoy companionship. They enjoy having fun with their friends.
Yeah. Hugo and I frolic sometimes. That's just what we do.
As you do.
We enjoy it. There was no trade involved.
It is better to have something than nothing. It's better yet to share generously the something you have. But it's even better than that, however, to become widely known for generous sharing. Jordan Peterson believes that the highest thing you can do is to share with others and become well known for that, as it increases your stock in the lobster hierarchy.
Okay, but isn't that socialism?
No, he's just dumb.
Oh.
Mary's son, Christ, offers himself to God and the world to betrayal, torture, and death, to the very point of despair on the cross, where he cries out those terrible words, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?
Only in one version, of course.
Yeah, Matthew 27:46. That is the archetypal story of the man who gives all for the sake of the better, who offers up his life for the advancement of being, who allows God's will to become manifest fully within the confines of a single mortal life.
If I didn't know any better, I'd say that if you listen to... if you read between the lines, I'm pretty sure it just says Jordan Peterson, then there's an asterisk, and it just says fap, with another asterisk at the end.
Maybe. That is the model for the honorable man in Christ's case, however, as he sacrifices himself, God his Father is simultaneously sacrificing his Son. It is for this reason that the Christian sacrificial drama of Son and Self is archetypal. It's a story at the limit, where nothing more extreme, nothing greater can be imagined. That's the very definition of archetypal.
I can think of many things worse than what happens to Jesus.
Jesus...
He doesn't even die.
He just goes home.
It's I don't know, it's like a real rough day. Granted, real rough day. Yeah. But have you considered Job?
Fair enough.
His whole family dies.
Yep.
Not just his son, but his daughters, all of his sons, his wife. He suffers for months, not only mental but physical anguish. He loses all of his property. And then, of course, at the end of that, he gets all of it back except for the family, which, of course, has to be brand new people. So,
but it doesn't matter. Family are just accessories in the old days.
So what
the wise people who wrote the Bible.
What I'm telling you here is that even within the Bible, people have suffered worse than Jesus suffered. How about the concubine that gets gang raped and then murdered? I feel like maybe a whole night of gang rape is worse than one afternoon of beatings. That's just my guess.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to give the concubine precedence over Jesus, and now we are all concubinists.
Sounds good.
Okay. Praise be.
Pain and suffering define... Oh, wait, let me get my emo face on.
Oh, okay.
Do I look like Alex?
Our friend Alex?
Yeah.
Got him.
Pain and suffering define the world. Of that there can be no doubt. Sacrifice can hold pain and suffering in abeyance to a greater or lesser degree, and greater sacrifices can do that more effectively than lesser. Of that there can be no doubt. Everyone holds this knowledge in their soul. Thus, the person who wishes to alleviate suffering, who wishes to rectify the flaw in being, who wants to bring about the best of all futures, who wants to create heaven on earth, will make the greatest of sacrifices of self and child, of everything there is love, to live a life aimed at the good. He will forgo expediency, he will pursue the path of ultimate meaning, and he will in that manner bring salvation to an ever-desperate world. That was a lot of words to say nothing. Life is pain, and again he repeats the chapter title, do what is, good for you in the long term, not what is expedient.
Okay, but that sometimes expedient things can be good in the long term. Let's be real here, right?
Sure.
So, I use the example of not making a quick judgment, not turning into oncoming traffic, better for you in the long run.
Yeah. This next section is called Death, Toil, and Evil. The first sentence is, the tragedy of self-conscious being produces suffering, inevitable suffering. Jordan, you remember you're supposed to be writing a self-help book for maybe depressed people, right? And you're telling them, life is pain.
Again.
Inevitable pain.
Life
includes pain.
Life inevitably includes pain and suffering, and it does.
By painting it all with this very, very doomy brush...
Yeah, it's
not good for your incel fans.
It's just so melodramatic. It's not accurate to the life that anyone really lives unless they actually, I don't know, Rwandans for a spell probably actually did live a life of pure suffering.
Yeah.
Or many of them, not all of them, of course, but there are pockets in history where yes, a certain group of people lives a life of almost pure suffering. You'll invoke Godwin's law later, so I'll do it now. People that, 5-year-olds during the Holocaust, probably when that started, you're just kind of brimming into consciousness and can form memories. Yeah, that's probably a life of suffering, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there were people during the Holocaust outside of Germany, even within it, that were fucking fine. For the most part. Maybe sometime they would have a day of suffering. Sometimes they'd be just fine.
Ultimate suffering can exist. It doesn't mean you should paint the entirety of existence as fucking pain. Remember,
there are spells of pain.
Jordan, across the street, never down it.
Oh.
That's a cutting joke.
Welp.
Cain is outraged by his rejection, of course, speaking of God's rejection of his vegetable sacrifice.
The more we talk about this, the more stupid it gets.
Yeah. He confronts God, accuses him, and curses his creation. That proves to be a very poor decision. God responds in no uncertain terms that the fault is all with Cain, and worse, that Cain has knowingly and creatively dallied with sin and reaped the consequences. This is not at all what Cain wanted to hear. It's by no means an apology on God's part. Instead, it's insult added to injury. Cain, embittered to the core by God's response, plots revenge. He defiles the Creator audaciously. It's daring. Cain knows how to hurt. He's self-conscious, after all, and has become even more so in his suffering and shame. Again, all of this he's adding to the story. We read you the fucking thing earlier.
Yeah, I mean, there's more, but it's not about the death thing that he's talking about.
So he murders Abel in cold blood. He kills his brother, his own ideal, as Abel is everything Cain wishes to be.
Not said.
Not said in the Bible.
Not even implied. It's not implicit. It's certainly not explicit. It's just not in there.
Jordan, you understand adding things to a story and saying things are in a story that are not there. That is you lying, right? That's not being creative to make a point. You are lying. You are a liar.
That's why this whole chapter, and much of this book, but definitely this chapter, is the reason we're reading this. Like, it's just a religious propaganda book. This is a sermon. This whole chapter is just a sermon. Like, if you would go to a Catholic church and hear these words, would you be surprised?
No.
Of course not.
Conscious human malevolence can break the spirit even tragedy cannot shake. I remember discovering with her that one of my clients had been shocked into years of serious post-traumatic stress disorder.
Oh, God.
Daily physical shaking of terror and chronic nightly insomnia by the mere expression of her enraged, drunken boyfriend's face, his fallen countenance, as seen in Genesis 4:5. That's just Abel's downcast face as he kills Cain. She was more naive than she should have been, and that predisposed her to the trauma. But that's not the point. I think the point is, Jordan, you're saying, like,
yeah,
she should have known better. And, you could say that in many situations with hindsight. But maybe don't blame your patient when they get beaten by their abusive
I'm absolutely
boyfriend.
willing to grant that every person has some percentage of ownership over anything that happens to them.
It's just
But it's not your fault you get beat by a person.
No.
And I mean, unless you're inciting violence and get caught out. But this is her boyfriend. This isn't a person that, this is clearly a different situation. It blew my mind when I read this that Jordan, I don't know. It more blew my mind that I had to read it, not that he wrote it.
Yeah. Next, evil confronted. This section he begins to talk about Jesus in the wilderness, and that is what are you talking about Jesus again? It's almost like this is a religious book. He talks about the part in the Bible which did we already cover this?
Which one?
Jesus.
No, not Jesus walking in the desert is coming up soon.
Okay, Jesus tempted in the wilderness by Satan, and in that story, what happens is first Satan comes to Jesus, who's been fasting in the desert for 40 days, and he says, "Why don't you turn these rocks into loaves of bread?" Jesus says, "No, one can sustain themselves on the word of God alone,"
which is not true.
No,
don't do that. Also, 40 days and 40 nights is an idiom that we've discussed throughout the Atheist Bible study.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean an actual physical 40 days. It doesn't mean 40 rotations of the earth. It just means, like, that took a while.
Yeah. So then next Satan says, "Hey, why don't you jump off this cliff and have God's angels save you?" And Jesus says, "Don't test the Lord." And then the third thing Satan does is he takes him to the highest point in the world, I guess, and shows him all the kingdoms of the world.
Yeah.
Which obviously doesn't make sense in a literal
context. Well, the Incans do come up in this book, right? No?
No Tenoctolon.
No?
Sorry.
Okay.
But anyway.
That's 2 nights in a row we get to say that.
Yeah, that's the basics of the story. He says, like, "Why don't you become king of everything you can be?" And Jesus is like, "Nah, I'm good. I have heaven shit." So that's the story for context.
Something about, like, the kingdom of heaven is greater. Or something, like, off this world.
Yeah. Jesus was led into the wilderness, according to the story, to be tempted by the devil in Matthew chapter 4, verse 1. Prior to his crucifixion, this is the story of Cain, restated abstractly. He's now going to try and draw parallels between the Cain and Abel story and this Jesus tempted in the wilderness story that are such a stretch, even for Peterson. I feel like he was like a second away from pulling this part out of the book.
Even for someone in, like, seminary, I think, like, they'd be like, "Ooh, I don't know.
This is bad.
That doesn't sound good. You should rewrite that sermon."
Yeah. Cain is neither content nor happy, as we have seen. He's working hard, or so he thinks, but God is not pleased. Meanwhile, Abel is, by all appearances, dancing his way through life. His crops flourish. Women love him.
No!
None of this is in the book!
No!
You're making it up. You're lying.
Also, Abel didn't... He did cattle or something. He clearly didn't do crops.
Yep.
Like, that wasn't his job. His job was either hunter, which I'm assuming, or cattle person. No, it was cattle person, specifically, because it said the firstborn of his flock, which means he was a shepherd.
Yeah.
So, he didn't have crops to flourish. And there are certainly no women, because they were his sisters.
Yep.
I think he's just top lobstering Abel right now for some reason.
I'll tell you why he's doing it. Because he's setting up for his incel audience. You know, all those Abel Chads out there. You know, I think that's what he's doing, legitimately. I think he's trying to, like, be like, you know, all those Abel Chads out there, they're getting all the Stacys. I'm using incel terms, by the way.
Yeah.
It's gross when I say them, I know. It feels gross on my tongue.
I like it when Ice-T says it.
Yeah. Anyway.
You think we found an extra Stacy? How can there be so many Chads and Stacys involved?
Let's see what else he can read into the Cain and Abel story with absolutely no content actually being there.
I'm excited.
Worst of all, he's genuinely a good man and everyone knows it. He deserves his good fortune. All the more reason to envy and hate him. Things do not progress well for Cain by contrast as he broods on his misfortune. Like a vulture on an egg, he strives in his misery to give birth to something hellish, and in doing so enters the desert wilderness of his own mind. That's a stretch.
The desert wilderness of his own mind. He is cast out.
Yeah. He obsesses over his ill fortune, his betrayal by God. He nourishes his resentment. He indulges in ever more elaborate fantasies of revenge. None of this is in the book.
No.
And as he does so, his arrogance grows to Luciferian proportions.
Whoa!
Good word. I'm ill-used and oppressed, he thinks. This is a stupid, bloody planet as far as I'm concerned, and it can go to hell. And with that, Cain encounters Satan in the wilderness for all intents and purposes, and falls prey to his temptations.
I don't think he does.
No, what a stretch to try and compare those two stories.
I'm looking.
All he's saying, the only thing that is the same between the two stories is you could read into the Cain and Abel story and say he gives in to his temptation to kill his brother. But that's sort of implicit, not explicit, and it doesn't say that in the text whatsoever. He just gets mad and kills him. Because God's frankly being kind of a dick about, you know, they clearly had to have someone growing vegetables, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, this is when in the Bible study we talked about Cain gets driven out and then he says, anyone who sees me is going to kill me. Which led us to think, who the fuck else is there?
Yeah.
You're the first people that were born.
Mm-hmm.
But that's besides the point. And then the Lord says, not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. And then he gets the mark of Cain, and he heads into the land of Nod, east of Eden, which is a famous thing from an author that we made a joke about, but I can't remember. And then he makes love to his wife, and she gets pregnant with Enoch, and then it goes into chronological genealogy. So I just don't know where you're getting this information from, Jordan.
His butt.
His butt?
His butt.
That was so pure and cute. He got it from his butt. I love that.
I'm glad you're laughing now. Because here's the rape apologist part.
Oh, God.
Soldiers who develop post-traumatic stress disorder frequently develop it not because of something they saw, but because of something they did.
I wonder if that's true.
I don't know. There are many demons, so to speak, on the battlefield. Involvement in warfare is something that can open a gateway to hell. Now and then something climbs through and possesses some naive farm boy from Iowa, and he turns monstrous.
This is, for the record, anyone who does anything evil in war, he immediately, like, gets them past it. Like, you don't worry about the guilt. It's not necessarily your fault.
No, listen, he says...
I know, it gets worse.
The characterization of some naive farm boy from Iowa, and he turns monstrous. He does something terrible. He rapes and kills the women and massacres infants of my lie. And he watches himself do it, and some dark part of him enjoys it. And that is the part that is most unforgettable. And later... he will not know how to reconcile himself with the reality about himself and the world that was then revealed. And no wonder. Jordan, I'm not concerned about the PTSD of the insane rapist murderer who is under the guise of the U.S. military going to another country and raping the locals.
Yeah, no.
Okay,
good.
They might get PTSD from that. They're still a fucking monster, and it's not the war that made him do that. You don't just one day wake up and go... I think I'm gonna rape somebody. That's a proclivity that's probably already in you somewhere. And the fact that you're willing to give this amount of slack to someone who goes to a foreign country, rapes and murders people, and you feel bad for the rapist? What?
Should we bring up who he doesn't feel any sympathy for whatsoever?
The rapee? The raped person?
Well, not just that, just anybody in this the whole book. Countless numbers of people that he ought to give deference to, that he ought to respect the wishes of, and he just doesn't.
But the rapist, that's fine.
What the fuck, man?
If you'd hear, I'd probably spit on you a little bit.
Just a little bit?
That's assault, though. I wouldn't do that. Again, because I have empathy and recognize the laws of the land. Not gonna assault you, Peterson. Not worth it.
If you were here, I would slap you. It's a Peterson quote.
Oh boy. So then they get to the point where he's talking about Christ being shown the kingdoms of the world by Satan. Christ sees the kingdoms of the world laid out before him, for the taking. That's the siren call of earthly power, the opportunity to control and order everyone and everything. Christ is offered the pinnacle of the dominance hierarchy, the animalistic desire of every naked ape, the obedience of all, the most wondrous of estates, the power to build, to increase, the possibility of unlimited sensual gratification. That's expedience writ large, but that's not all. Such expansion of status also provides unlimited opportunity for the inner darkness to reveal itself. The lust for blood, rape, and destruction is very much part of power's attraction.
What?
Jordan Peterson just said...
Power's attraction...
And this, to me, this is a tacit admission of Jordan Peterson to me. I think he thinks everyone thinks this way.
I do too. If... I was talking about this. If I had power, do you ever fantasize about if you just had power over everything?
Usually, it's like I win a huge Powerball lottery and I have a lot of money.
Well, that's power in capitalist society.
Yeah,
sure.
To the beneficial things I could do. At no point does my mind go, think of how much murder and rapes I could do. Jordan, when you think about you getting power, if you feel that power will allow you to do things like hurt others and rape, and that's a thing that is inbuilt into the want for power for you, you are a psychopath.
Yeah. No, that's not good. When I think of power, I immediately think, how can I fix all these problems? That's what I think about.
And even if that's some of that's naive, it's not
absolutely it's naive,
not actively malicious.
Right, that's the point. I think, I can fix this. I probably can't, but I'm trying to think of the most malicious thing. If I had just ultimate I cannot think of it. I'm not even a choir boy. I don't have I don't have these inclinations, and it's I think that's typical too, right?
Jordan, if you or anyone in your audience has those inclinations, again, you are normalizing a dangerous way of thought, a violent, destructive, psychopathic way of thought. And you should not do that, and you should know that as a professional psychologist, and frankly, you should have your license revoked.
Yeah.
Anyway, you think we should just get quotes from this and find the best ones and send them all to the whatever board governs psychiatry in Canada?
I don't know how that works. How have they not gotten these? Have none of them read this?
I don't know. We'll see. This next section is titled Christianity and Its Problems. And you think Jordan's gonna throw you a bone and be like, here's some problems with Christianity. He uses this as an excuse to just tell you why Christianity's just the best, and everything in society that is good is because of Christianity.
He's going to say Carl Jung, Dostoevsky, Nietzsche. Is Socrates in this one? Because Socrates was in the earlier. Okay, so he's just going to go through. He's going to go through several different iterations of spiritual thought and thinkers, and it's just obnoxious. It's just so obnoxious in the way he dismisses these problems.
So after a short bit where he's like, Christianity can maybe make you not try stuff until science came along. That's the one criticism he gave of it. Then the rest of this 4 or 5 page thing about criticizing Christianity is praising it. This is not to say that Christianity, even in its incomplete realized form, was a failure. Quite the contrary. Christianity achieved the well-nigh impossible. The Christian doctrine elevated the individual soul, placing slave and master and commoner and nobleman alike on the same metaphysical footing.
No.
Rendering them equal before God and the law. Christianity insisted that even the king was only one among many, for something so contrary to all apparent evidence to find its footing. The idea that worldly power and prominence were indicators of God's particular favor had to be radically de-emphasized. Divine right of kings, which had been around fucking forever, and was used to justify the position of the monarchy in many countries.
Jesus plainly speaks to slaves about be good slaves under your masters and listen so you don't have to get the shit kicked out of you. And then after the fact, while you're slaves, you won't be in the afterlife. It's not about being equal, it's about being eventually equal.
Yeah.
What? No, they have to live as slaves.
Jesus was pretty okay with hierarchies on earth. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Slaves obey
taxes,
their masters.
right.
Even fucking abusive masters, which he expressly states.
And beyond that, Jordan, not only is this antithetical to what is actually said by Jesus in the Bible, but he's also socialist and wants you to give all your money to the poor. And you literally buck against that in this chapter.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
In consequence, the metaphysical conception of the implicit transcendent worth of each and every soul established itself against impossible odds as the fundamental proposition of Western law and society. You know,
Jesus.
That's not the case, as I'm pretty sure for a long period of time, a lot of white Protestants, slave owners, didn't think slaves were even human beings with souls, so no. No.
And they used the Bible to defend that. Now, Jordan may say, because he's Canadian, so I don't know how he feels about American slavery.
Sure.
I hope he looks on it with disdain, but they used those same words to go to bat for slavery.
Unequally yoked, Jesus telling the slave, obey your masters.
It created the Civil War. It's not... Without Christianity, I don't think we have American chattel slavery in the way it was implemented.
That's such a butterfly effect thing.
I agree, but it's in the way it was manifested. Even if you have slavery,
it wouldn't have been as brutal and dehumanizing.
I don't think it would have been, because you wouldn't have had this lattice work of those are others, not human beings.
Sure. It would do us well to remember as well that the immediate utility of slavery is obvious, and that the argument that the strong should dominate the weak is compelling, convenient, and eminently practical, at least for the strong.
Okay, this is a debate you can have. I want to grant him this for the sake of argument, because I think from a slave owner's point of view, it is obviously beneficial to have slaves.
Sure.
But I don't think that's a vote for slavery in the way he thinks it is.
No, also the Industrial Revolution was going around that
right, it was
time.
going to end.
It was going to end one way or another. But anyway, this means that a revolutionary critique of everything slave-owning societies valued was necessary before the practice could even be questioned, let alone halted, including the idea that wielding power and authority made the slave owners noble, including the even more fundamental idea that the power wielded by the slave owners was valid and even virtuous. It's almost like Jesus, the main character in the New Testament, from which the religion gets its name, said, "Slaves, obey your masters."
Yeah.
And was very explicit that he was okay with slavery. Weird! Christianity made explicit the surprising claim that even the lowliest person had rights. Unless you're a woman!
Yeah.
Or not an Israelite! Or a Christian!
Come on, man! Did you read the book? Has he ever read the Bible? Is this crazy?
I don't know, man. I really don't.
Is this dementia?
This is not to say that Christianity is without its problems, but it is more appropriate to note that they were the sort of problems that emerge only after an entirely different set of more serious problems had been solved.
Hand wave it away! Everything's fine!
The society produced by Christianity was far less barbaric than the pagan.
No, it wasn't!
And even Roman. He knows the Dark Ages existed, right?
So he's going to mention here that in the Roman Empire, slaves were sometimes fed to the lions and the things. I mean, most of the extreme stuff you see there is, they had some crazy people in charge, and that wasn't due to their lack of Christianity.
No.
Nero was a fucking maniac. They had some other ones. There was a period of time in Rome called Pax Romana, under Augustus Caesar and the like, where it was pretty fucking dope relative to the rest of the world. And that's just what happened. Christianity, on the other hand, comes in, everything falls to pieces. You have the Dark Ages, and leading up to the fucking Enlightenment, if you try to buck off the religious fucking rider that's on humanity's back, but you have the Crusades, not to mention the Dark Ages, which are fucking just abysmal and terrible. You have fucking the Catholic Church. What's that called? I forget the name of it. Where they demand money. It's not tithing. It's the other thing.
No, where they, in order to save your soul, they ask for money.
I forget what it's called.
I forgot what it's called too. On the screen, maybe.
There it is. Maybe. I don't know if I remembered. And then you have the Spanish Inquisition, which he'll bring up, but doesn't apparently consider that Christian.
The fucking Crusades.
Yeah, no big deal. I mean,
evil done in the name of Christianity clearly isn't done in the name of Christianity, because that would make Christianity look bad. Anyway, continuing. Christian society at least recognized that feeding slaves to ravenous lions for entertainment of the populace was wrong. Really? Because I think it was more economic, but it... Also, I don't mean to bring Django Unchained into this.
Okay.
But Mandingo fighting was a thing.
Right, we don't have lions in the United States, but it you know...
No.
Ask your local Black American how they feel about what you just said.
Yeah.
And I assume they know somebody who knew somebody, because we're not that many generations out of here, who had to endure this kind of treatment. And I don't know. I don't know if it'll humble them. I don't know if it'll make them reconsider. I know Canada's like pretty far north, but not so far north that you can't read a book about it.
No.
Like, we allow it.
Didn't feed them to lions, whipped them until they would stop fighting back against their own subjugation, and if they ran away, instead of lions eating them, we'd send dogs after them, and would hobble them, and cripple them.
I don't know, but did you see recently, I'm just going to take a little aside, because I want to not read this book for just a second.
Oh, I get it.
Did you see recently there was some clips coming out of Jordan Peterson being asked who his favorite women are in certain... Have you seen these?
No.
Who's your favorite author? And he goes, Dostoevsky. Who's your favorite female author?
Does he say J.K. Rowling?
No. He doesn't give an answer because it's not easy for him.
He can't think of a single female author.
No. Who's someone you respect that's a woman in history? It takes a long time, too. I don't know if this is the same one or a different one. He eventually comes to Florence Nightingale.
The fucking because
yes.
she's a nurse.
Right, but he couldn't come up with her. The interviewer had to come up with it. When they asked what your favorite female author was, I had two answers. I said Laura Wexler and Harper Lee. Immediately?
Sure, Harper Lee, fine.
Yeah.
She wrote one goddamn book.
Yeah.
Let's forget Go Set a Watchman. Didn't happen.
Not great.
Forget it.
Not great. Did you know that she, I learned this because I watched the movie. She worked with Capote on In Cold Blood.
I did not know that.
She was there on the road with him when he met the murderers.
Very interesting.
I didn't know she was with him either, and she wrote To Kill a Mockingbird while on the road, and then sent it. Anyway, very interesting. But yeah, Harper Lee is pretty dope.
That's enough about competent and interesting authors.
Yeah, oh buddy. Anyway, Laura Wexler, Fire in a Canebrake. It's a good one, and Jordan Peterson would hate it because it's about black voter suppression and lynchings.
He couldn't
in Georgia,
he couldn't even pull like Jane Austen out of his ass.
No,
he couldn't.
Really, that's what I was thinking. Like J.K. Rowling, Jane Austen. Like there's so many.
Judy Blume. Tales of a Sixth Grade Nothing. Jordan, don't you know?
Just because I want to think of it, I can't. Mary Shelley. Yeah. I couldn't think of Mary Shelley for just a second. Like, sure. I mean, it's just so easy. Do you not read books?
Emily Dickinson? I don't know. She's an author, although
sure.
not,
Yeah, I get you.
Poetry counts.
Poetry counts?
Anyway, continuing.
Jesus, fuck.
Yep. Christianity objected to infanticide, to prostitution. I'd argue objecting to prostitution is not necessarily on a moral high ground. There are people who do sex work in countries where it's legal.
I don't see anything wrong with prostitution, if I'm honest. Like, I'm trying to think of the worst part of prostitution. It's only because it's outlawed that I think the bad stuff happens.
Yeah, in places where it's legal and it's very tightly controlled, I think it's fine.
Fuck it, man. I mean, just because there's a camera, is that different?
Yeah, I wouldn't partake of the service, but hey, you do you.
Yeah, man, that's me either. I'm not really into that because I'm insecure.
Yeah. Christianity also objected to the principle that might makes right. That's not true. It just puts God as the mightiest and the rightiest.
Yeah.
It insisted that women were as valuable as men.
Oh, did it? Oh, wow.
In the Old Testament, it literally tells you how much less of a person a woman is, because they talk about inheritance and how much
I used to remember the number. What was the number?
Oh god, they're at least half. They're at least half a person.
Yeah, it was like half a person.
It's either from half to like 70% of a person.
I think we found out during that slaves in the 3/5 Compromise were worth more than a woman in the Old Testament.
Yeah, we did.
That sounds correct.
That's what it was. Again, Jordan just lying.
Also, Jesus calls a woman literally a dog because she's not an Israelite.
She's a Canaanite.
So
you Canaanite dog, how dare you come to me?
Yeah. So I mean, like, women, really? Christian women, sometimes, but of course they couldn't be in the clergy for quite some time.
Nietzsche claimed, he's going to talk about Nietzsche now. Nietzsche claimed first that it was precisely the sense of truth developed in the highest sense by Christianity itself that ultimately came to question and then to undermine the fundamental presuppositions of the faith. That was partially because the difference between moral or narrative truth and objective truth had not yet been fully comprehended.
I'm pretty sure we've comprehended what truth is.
Truth, in the literal sense, is things that are true, and moral truth is a word that Jordan Peterson likes to throw around when he means stories with morals. That's not a moral truth. That's a moral in a story. I think you're muddying the waters of what things like facts and truth mean.
Even beyond that, a moral truth in his definition doesn't always land with everybody. No. Because we're socially we're disparate as far as our morality is concerned. That's why that's why morality is subjective. In the Undoomed video I made a critique of on my Twitch channel, he brought up now not only do we have subjective morality, but we have this. I don't remember what the other thing was, but like, is subjective morality a thing these people quabble over?
I don't know.
Like, it's so obvious there's subjective morality and not objective.
Yeah. Even the modern atheist opposed to Christianity belittle fundamentalists for insisting, for example, the creation account in Genesis is objectively true. They are using their sense of truth, highly developed over the centuries of Christian culture, to engage in such argumentation.
You can't be an atheist because really all your thoughts stem from Christianity.
He is saying that the idea of objective truth did not exist prior to Christianity.
That's just false. It's just false.
He's a liar.
It's plainly false. I mean, he talks about Socrates in this.
Yep.
These people were discovering truth before the Bible was ever contemplated.
Yep. Anyway, for Nietzsche and Dostoevsky alike, freedom, even the ability to act, requires constraint. For this reason, they both recognize the vital necessity of the dogma of the church. The individual must be constrained, molded, even brought close to destruction by a restrictive, coherent, disciplinary structure before he or she can act freely and competently. Yeah, but that doesn't have to be, again, a religious structure. Society has a structure. We all have empathy to help us structure ourselves and our moral actions. We have laws on the books that tell us how to behave. We have social upbringing that teaches us right and wrong.
And all of this is part of the social contract of living in a shared society. You could easily move out of these societies and find at this point in human history, since travel's so easy, and find a society that more aligns with your personal outlook on this sort of thing, or you can try by voting and other means to change it where you live. But the idea that you need specifically the church, and of course Nietzsche and Dostoevsky thought this because they lived in a time when the church had fuckloads of power.
Yeah.
So I don't know why he can't segment these things based on societal impact due to the time they're in.
No, he can't contextualize very well.
It's very weird.
But the dogma is dead, at least to the Western modern audience. It perished along with God. What has emerged from behind its corpse, however, and this as an issue of central importance, is something even more dead, something that was never alive even in the past. Nihilism, as well as an equally dangerous susceptibility to new, totalizing, utopian ideas. Oh no, utopian ideals!
Who wants to live in a utopia? Not I, says the Canadian.
It was in the aftermath of God's death that the great collective horrors of communism and fascism sprang forth, as Dostoevsky and Nietzsche predicted they would. Nietzsche, for his part, posited that individual human beings would have to invent their own values in the aftermath of God's death. But this is the element of his thinking that appears weakest psychologically. We cannot invent our own values because we cannot merely impose what we believe on our souls. I don't know what... let me read that sentence again.
Okay.
We cannot invent our own values because we cannot merely impose what we believe on our souls.
So our souls overwrite what we believe?
I don't know what that sentence means outside of a religious context. So clearly Jordan Peterson is religious, and he's giving a religious message. What does that mean?
Like in a secular... Like, I don't think a secular person thinks like that, right? Like,
no.
Like, you could mean souls like my innate
this is him
moral
talking...
fabric, but like even then you could, because as a secular person, I say my innate moral reasoning leads me to the values that I want to implement, right? Even though I, as a secular person, understand that not only does my geographic location, which involves my culture, but also just like kind of how economically I'm either well off or poor, like all of these things, the nature of it, not the nurture of it, informs my opinion on these subjects, but it has nothing to do with my soul or the innateness therein. I don't know. I don't really know how to reconcile that unless I'm religious.
It sounds like he's talking about a literal soul.
Right. And of course, if you're religious, you believe that God's message and the word of Jesus Christ is imprinted on your soul. Yeah. And so it's self-evident as to why you would feel the way you feel about this.
Yeah. Now, an idea is not the same thing as a fact. A fact is something that is dead in and of itself. It has no consciousness, no will to power, no motivation, no action. He's going to get into a real semantics thing here that's going to make no sense, so stay with us.
Buckle in.
There are billions of dead facts. The internet is a graveyard of dead facts. Again, he does not like facts.
Dead facts right here seems like a buzz catchphrase similar to fake news.
Yeah. But an idea that grips a person is alive. It wants to express itself, to live in the world. It is for this reason that the depth psychologist Freud and Jung, paramount among them, insisted that the human psyche was a battleground for ideas. Freud and Freudian analysis is not considered, like, true most of the time these days.
Freud isn't
Sometimes
really touted.
I was actually talking to my therapist about this the other day, because we were talking about narcissists. I was talking about my dad, and I was talking about Donald Trump for a while. So we were talking about narcissism. And when you get into talking about narcissists, the idea of ego can come into play.
Sure.
But just as a way to help describe the way that narcissists will protect
id,
their... Yeah. But that's not generally used to, like, as the consensus model for most people.
I don't think that's actually how we're built anyway. It's just a nice way to visualize it, I think. But are you just going to continue before we talk about the wrongness of this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Freud and Jung, paramount among them, insisted that the human psyche was a battleground for ideas. An idea has an aim. It wants something. It posits a value structure. An idea believes that what it is aiming for is better than what it has now. It reduces the world to those things that aid or impede its realization, and it reduces everything else to irrelevance. An idea defines figure against ground. An idea is a personality, not a fact.
So he's making a case that facts aren't as important as ideas.
His feels are more important than the reals, Jake.
I guess so. So I don't even know where to begin with this necessarily, because facts are far more important than any ideas. But ideas, of course, are important.
Facts should always inform your ideas.
That's kind of the point, right?
Otherwise, your ideas are based on...
not facts.
Nothing.
Not truths. But of course, truth is what helps you succeed and live for another day, and survive, not necessarily things that are true and factual.
God,
I don't understand how a person can come out against facts. How can you be like, nah, not facts?
I will not allow this campaign to be determined by facts. Remember when that fucking sunk a candidate?
Who was that?
Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney, that's right.
Yeah.
Man, Mitt would clean up.
Yeah. Too bad. The letter R is stained for the next 20 years.
Yeah, well.
Vote on the 6th, people. Very important. This is to say nothing other than that the future can be made better if the proper sacrifices take place in the present. No other animal has ever figured this out, and it took us untold hundreds of thousands of years to do it. Squirrels hide nuts for the winter.
Yep.
Just pointing that out. It took further eons of observation and hero worship and then millennia of study to distill that idea into a story. It then took additional vast stretches of time to assess the story, to incorporate it, so that we can now simply say, if you are disciplined and privileged the future over the present, you can change the structure of reality.
That's not how it worked. In the agricultural revolution, what we had was surplus. And so when you have surplus, you can either eat it all immediately, or save it and look to save it. It wasn't a sacrifice. Literally, having a surplus made it so you didn't have to sacrifice. And out of that, we came up with ways to preserve the future and make that as important as now, because cold happens, seasons happen, seasons change. So when you're growing shit, sometimes you gotta have stuff left over. It's why we have bread and beer and salted stuff and pickles. Like, where do you think these things come from? Wine exists because we needed to be able to have portable, potable sources of drinking water. Like, what the fuck? This is not a mystery. No. It's anthropologically sound in every way. And it has nothing to do with your stories.
He goes on to talk about René Descartes a little bit, and who is Descartes, a French philosopher. He's the one who essentially said, I think, therefore I am. In 1984, I started down the same road as Descartes. Oh yes, Jordan, please put yourself up there with him. He'll say he doesn't in a second,
but he does.
But then he continues to compare himself to him.
Yeah.
I did not know it was the same road at the time, and I am not claiming kinship with Descartes, who is rightfully regarded as one of the greatest philosophers of all time. But I was truly plagued with doubt. I had outgrown the shallow Christianity of my youth by the time I could understand the fundamentals of Darwinian theory. After that, I could not distinguish the basic elements of Christian belief from the wishful thinking. The socialism that soon afterward became so attractive to me...
What?
The socialism that soon afterward became so attractive to me as an alternative proved equally insubstantial with time.
This isn't going to get better.
No. I came to understand, through the great George Orwell... Did he read 1984 and didn't realize it was anti-fascist?
Yeah.
Anyway... I mean, you could argue certainly anti-communism as well. The Truth Bureau.
Oh, sure,
I get it.
sure.
Definitely anti-USSR.
But I think, you know, authoritarian communism is just also fascism. I don't know. It's sure economically it doesn't quite ring the same, but like it's not fundamentally different experience for someone who lives there.
Sure. Much of the things I found in socialism, its motivated hatred of the rich and successful instead of true regard for the poor. See, again, this tells to me that for him, socialism was hating rich people.
I don't understand.
That's not the way I view socialism. I'm in favor of democratic socialism in certain ways.
Absolutely.
I want social services and safety nets to be available for everyone.
I'm also of the opinion that if you can make bank, make your bank, man. I'm good with that.
Sure.
Like if you want to do whatever it takes to become the millionaire that you want to become, that's fucking great. Our friend Arian Foster happens to be a millionaire. I don't blame his hustle any less than I blame someone who has a bunch of fucking liquor stores.
No.
You know what I mean? But also, and I think Arian agrees, and so do many people that own a bunch of liquor stores, that like there are people that weren't as fortunate for either opportunity or skill or a combination or many other factors that deserve human dignity in the way that we don't as a society, not just America, but the Western world in general, doesn't often offer dignity to those that don't have either an education or maybe geography plays a role, or class or station, or in the past, race or sex. Socialism in general, I think flat socialism, bad. I think elements of socialism, good. And I think we can do both. And I think it's proven that we can do both.
Sure.
And the fact that Jordan Peterson comes out swinging at this, and for some reason, fascism and communism, this comes out of left field. I don't know what this is here for, other than to remind you that he's a conservative Christian man.
Besides, the socialists were more intrinsically capitalistic than the capitalists. They believed just as strongly in money. They just thought that if different people had the money, the problems plaguing humanity would vanish. Let me explain.
Not had the money.
Let me explain.
Had some more money.
He's completely mischaracterizing socialism and capitalism. Capitalism is a structure in which certain segments of the population have capital, money or means of production by which they can produce value.
Sure.
They then use their capital to hire labor, and the labor then gets paid, does the labor. Most of the, at least in our system, most of the products of the labor, the benefits go to the people at the top who provided the capital. That's capitalism.
Now, and that's viable for a lot of different industries. I like to use because I was part of it, and so were you, I like to use the example of a restaurant. I think it makes sense for the person that owns the restaurant to make the profit first, and then it gets paid out in the salary that you agreed to when you got the job.
Sure.
I think that makes sense. But when it comes to something like medicine, it seems immoral.
The profit motive hurts it. But also, on top of that, his characterization as socialism, implying that socialism should not include money. That's not what socialism is saying. It's just about distribution of wealth in a way that people who make the most money are making sure they're giving back to the society.
You could do that without money as well. You could just call it goods and services. You could call it food, whatever. But there is a structure within all human society where something to survive is gained by work. And in a socialist society, or one that has socialist elements, just being a person grants you some survivability.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the point. Now, I agree with Jordan Peterson in that socialism could definitely not work out.
Yeah.
Most people who say, I'm for socialist things, aren't just socialists.
No.
They're social capitalists, which is pretty much what almost every left-leaning person is right now in America.
So, yeah.
Most of them want, social things for people that are poor, that don't have a lot of help, but they don't want millionaires to not be millionaires.
No.
They maybe want billionaires to not turn into trillionaires.
They want people to pay their fair share of taxes. When you're very rich, you have a responsibility to the place you live.
That's what I think. I don't see why that's bad.
Yep, this is simply untrue. There are many problems money does not solve, and that others that make it worse. Rich people still
This has nothing to do with economics, for the record.
Rich people still get divorced and alienate themselves from their children and suffer from existential angst and develop cancer and dementia. They can pay for the cancer and they can pay for the treatment.
He comes from Canada, though. See, that's the difference. He doesn't. He lives in a socialist country.
He doesn't get it. Yeah. Anyway.
He just doesn't get it, man. And I think you get it at that point. Basically, he says, well, money doesn't buy happiness. You know what does buy happiness? Ideas. Christian ones. Christian ideas bring happiness.
Yep.
But do they, though? Because Christians still go through divorce and have cancer and can't afford it and all sorts of shit. There's plenty of Christians who get destroyed in Tornado Alley in the middle of the country. There's still a bunch of Christians who fucking wanted slaves. There's still a bunch of slaves that were Christians. I don't even understand, man. It's just the human experience, and I don't know why socialism is brought up here. It seems like a weird argument to make in the middle of his religious rant.
Yep. What can I not doubt? The reality of suffering. It brooks no arguments. Nihilists cannot undermine it with skepticism. Totalitarians cannot bash it. Cynics cannot escape from its reality. Suffering is real, and the artful infliction of suffering on another for its own sake is wrong.
Okay.
That became the cornerstone of my beliefs.
Okay, so is pleasure, though. Pleasure is also imminent.
He is saying his bedrock cornerstone belief at the end of the day is life is suffering, suffering is wrong. That's a profoundly negative light through which to view everything else in your life.
Also, is suffering inherently wrong? I think it's a state of being, not necessarily a right or wrong, right?
He goes on
I think causing suffering, he talks about.
Sure, he goes about relieving suffering is good.
Absolutely.
He basically defines morality as good things are relieving as much suffering as possible. And as a moral system, I don't disagree.
How can he say that and disagree with Sam Harris about it at the same time?
Because Sam Harris is an atheist.
Fucking dumb.
Yep. Meaning is what emerges beautifully and profoundly like a newly formed rosebud opening itself out of nothingness into the light of sun and God. Sun and God.
He's not religious, though.
Not religious, though.
Oh.
Meaning is the lotus striving upward through the dark lake depths, through the ever-clearing water, blooming forth on the very surface, revealing within itself the golden Buddha, himself perfectly integrated, such that the revelations of the divine will make itself manifest in every word and gesture. That was a paragraph of Deepak Chopra level.
I was reading that, and
he was flapping his lips, but nothing came out.
My whole Twitch chat, about 50 people were like, what?
Yeah. He had a word count he had to get to, I think. Meaning is the ultimate balance between, on the one hand, the chaos of transformation and possibility, and on the other, the discipline of pristine order, whose purpose is to produce out of the attendant chaos an order that will be even more immaculate and capable of bringing forth a still more balanced and productive chaos and order. Meaning is the way, the path of life more abundant, the place you live where you are guided by love and speaking truth, and when nothing you want or could possibly want takes any precedence over precisely that. Do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. He just said words. He said, do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Expedient, sorry. Spent the chapter talking about the Bible.
Yeah.
And why truth comes from the Bible, and why all objective truth owes itself to Christianity.
Yep. And Western values.
And then he just ends the chapter by repeating what he said at the beginning without...
He didn't really talk about, and basically this is on the surface you think this is don't seek instant gratification when long-term gains can be made, which is good advice, again, in a nutshell. That's fine, and in a vacuum away from any of the other words, but he doesn't actually talk about that topic. He talks about kind of the origins of his own philosophy on how life is suffering.
And the only way to alleviate it is via value systems derived from Western Christianity.
Right, but that doesn't have anything to do with the sacrifice. I think it was just a way for him to talk about Jesus for a little bit, but...
Yeah, this is a Trojan book.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't really have anything to do with the
It's a book of apologetics that's weaning you into apologetics while making you think it is a self-help book.
I have encountered so many people that have said, since you started this, I actually understood the book better, and I'm no longer a fan of Jordan Peterson, so thank you.
That's good.
And I'd like for you to join that bus. There's lots of them. There's lots of ex-JBP fans up in here. Let's keep it going, man. You guys, I don't hate you. I don't even hate Jordan Peterson fans.
Nah.
I just want you to not have... this is not helping anybody. In the middle of a book... In the middle of a chapter about living your best life, I guess, is what he's talking about. He makes apologies for rapists.
Yep.
And he says that if you're an atheist, you're really just a Christian. All right, that's it. That's the end of this one.
That's it.
So next time, what's chapter 8?
Let's see.
Just so we can.
Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Oh, that's funny, because you lied a lot in the previous chapter.
Wowzers. So, we'll see what that's even about.
How many times do you think he'll lie in the chapter about not lying?
Too many to count.
Okay.
Because, like...
We'll keep it tally.
Will we?
Yep.
Okay. It's a lot. So, yeah. I guess, look forward to that. If you want, you can follow Hugo Reloaded. You can follow me at Papa Bird Jake on the Twitter machine. You ought to. We're very active. I'm very active.
I'm gonna get more active soon.
More active! And there is there's a nice little period of time right now, because right before a midterm where 75% of my mentions are butthurt conservatives. So if you're into that, come on in. It's a good time.
And make sure to go vote on the 6th.
Yeah. Preferably just not for anyone with a Republican. Even if they're conservative, but they don't have an R next to their name. I don't care. But the Republicans are trash right now. They're endorsing, well, probably rapists. They endorsed the actual racist last time. They endorsed this orange guy for some reason. They endorse a bunch of values that I don't think you hold on to. No. Find yourself a nice libertarian. Settle down with them if you're hyper-conservative and you watch this show for some goddamn reason. Like settle down with them. The libertarians got your back and they're not going to sell out for some of this partisan, gotcha politics.
Man, libertarians are going to be hurting for new members once weed is legal. All the 14-year-olds are going to drop the party. Yeah. What are you doing for me now?
Yeah. If you can't vote for a Democrat, vote Green or vote Independent. I don't give a shit. Just do your,
I'm just going to say right now, vote for Democrats.
I'm fine with you voting for... I'm going to vote probably for mostly my Democrats. We'll see. I'm going to do a little bit more research before I do it. Like last time I voted for the guy, Abdul Al-Sayed, I think it was Al-Sayed, am I getting his name wrong? Who was a Justice Democrat. He lost, but I still voted for him, but he was technically in the Democratic Party, so. There's lots of really progressive people that are coming out in this election, that are tired of the corporate Democrat structure, so, yeah.
So anyway,
a lot of people.
Until next... Oh, Patreon, if you want to support that. We also have a P.O. box if you want to send us anything.
We just did a P.O. unboxing, so you see a lot of new stuff here. Bahamut and his... or her... I don't actually know what Bahamut is.
Got tits.
Got titties, but also probably there's a sack here.
Okay, maybe
so,
both.
Non-binary Bahamut has a little penis shrine, so if you want to send us ding-dings, I guess that's a thing. All those, I think, are from Paul, though. So, that's there. Wednesday, I'm having a guest on twitch.tv/actualjake. It's Sophane from Poisoning the Well. We're going to take out the trash.
Can I come on here and take out the trash thing sometime?
Yeah! So, when I'm taking out the trash, I do video responses to trash.
Sounds fun.
Undoomed has been on there. Hunter Avalone. PragerU. I got it all, man. I got it all.
So that's it. Until next time, I'm Hugo.
I'm Jake.
This has been Hugo and Jake, and...
This is trash!
This book is awful.
Woo! Not good. Not good. Ooh, feels good to... It's good to do a squat right here.
No one was gonna call you out on the lies, Jordan?
That's what I'm thinking. Like, I'm so surprised. He's like... God damn.